I found a cruise. Now what comes next? What do I pay and when? And if I find I cannot go, well, what will happen then? Let's chat. Welcome back to My Travel Window. Our goal is to entice you to want to travel and then give you the tips to get out and actually do it. Our byline, as always, is if not now, when? Today we're going to talk about the details of how to go about booking a cruise. If you like these videos, please remember to subscribe and hit the like button. What this does is tells YouTube that there are people actually interested in our videos, and it opens us up to a wider audience and really helps us out. Thank you. Now let's get to the topic at hand. Stay to the end and get the story behind this picture from our cruise in October of 21. This is the second part of our three-part series on cruising. Today we're going to focus on the nuts and bolts of buying and taking a cruise. Because this video is made in very early 2022, we'll include the changes to that process that have been brought about by the COVID pandemic, which threatened the cruise industry as much or more than any other industry. My wife and I sailed in Europe in late 2021, and we're going to weave that experience into this video as well. Cruises are different from land trips in several ways. Lead times are longer. For airlines and hotels, a reservation a year in advance is unusual. Cruises can be booked 2 or 3 years in advance. Travel agents are still the norm, with about 70% of cruises booked through an agent. Payments are normally in 2 parts. A deposit, which may or may not be refundable, and a final payment generally due 75 to 90 days in advance of the cruise. Pricing and perks can change, generally for the better, during the process. Travel insurance is much more important because cancellation penalties can be severe. Finally, cruise ships are the single most restrictive form of travel in the COVID area. Let's break the buying process down into 3 component parts. Research, ending in a deposit to secure a reservation. Then, the second part would be from reservation through final payment date. And finally, from final payment date to embarkation. Let's take these one at a time. Step 1. Steps to making a reservation. For us, the most fun parts of the whole adventure are the steps we take to select just the right cruise. In the next video, we'll delve more into how we go about that process. But for now, let's just say the outcome of the process will need to be 4 things. The choice of a cruise with a specific departure date. The selection of a type of cabin. There's 4 basic types. Inside, no windows. Ocean view, window but no outside exit. Balcony or a suite, i.e. a deluxe balcony. Selection of a specific cabin may be involved depending on your preferences. Third, decision on a travel agent. You've heard the story. What happens when a person with money meets a person with experience? The person with experience comes away with money, and the person with money comes away with experience. So when you approach a cruise company and are looking to make a reservation, you can either come to them with lots of money and no experience, or you can bring more experience in the form of a travel agent and generally come away with more money or money better spent. Do you want to be the cruiser making the decisions with money, or the cruiser making a decision with experience? The last thing is you'll need a plan for what you're going to do about travel insurance. This is necessary because some cruise line travel insurance is only offered early in the process at reservation time or shortly thereafter. So you'll need to know early on whether you're going to take it or find it some other way. In the next video, we'll give tools to do research for each of these parts. Now let's look at the second phase. Before final payment, the goals would be to firm up that travel insurance and the cabin selection. Make sure you meet all the prerequisites. Passports current, visas if necessary, immunization documentation, COVID and otherwise. Start researching excursions and options. These fill up. And you don't want to be in a position where you get to a place and want to see something and aren't able to do that. Monitor price changes, and lastly, make sure you can commit to the final payment and understand the options if you need to cancel. Third and final phase. Take last steps before embarkation. You can't just show up luggage in hand and walk on the ship anymore. First, you need to double check to make sure you meet the COVID requirements, including a COVID test. If you don't, you will not get on the ship. You have to do the complete pre-registration process and make sure you have a passport and a valid credit card, or you will likewise not get on the ship. Finally, you need to make sure you can arrive when you need to. I heartily recommend that you're at the location, particularly if it's involves an airplane flight, at least the night before the cruise ship. And what happens now in COVID era is that cruise ships dock in pieces. They spread the boarding out so that people are not in so much contact. And so you need to make sure you understand where you are in the boarding process and be there at that time. In our next video, we'll give you 10 resources we found invaluable in this entire process. They will help you with each of the steps listed here. Before my promised picture explanation, I want to give you the reality of cruising right now. My wife and I did a 12-night Holland America cruise in October 2021, in the lull between the Delta and Omicron COVID spikes. Almost all the things that we experienced would still be the reality for someone planning to sail in the near future. To put this in context, our cruise was originally scheduled for the spring of 2020. 10 days before we were to leave the U.S., Italy shut down and our cruise was canceled. We would ultimately reschedule the cruise 4 times before it finally happened. To say we were eager to finally cruise was an understatement. During the 18 months of rescheduling, the itinerary changed twice, dropping a key port, adding another, and changing the embarkation location. Shortly before departure, a COVID spike in Montenegro caused that port to be dropped and replaced with another. This was a 100% vaccinated ship, meaning the proof of vaccination was required with no exceptions. In addition, we had to have a negative COVID test to get into Italy, another on embarkation day to get on the ship, a third one to get back into Italy from the ship, and a fourth to fly back to the USA. While on the ship, which was sailing with about 40% capacity, masks were required for all indoor venues except when eating. To top this off, weather issues caused us to miss one port, complicated both our embarkation and disembarkation locations as well. I tell you these things to let you know that cruising today has an extra layer of complexity. If you're a person that bristles at the COVID protocols or one that stresses over unexpected adjustments during a trip, this might not be the best time for you to travel. For the rest of us, a cruise that is 90% of normal is still wonderful. We would do it again in a heartbeat. Now to this final picture. What you see here is Santorini Harbor. The island of Santorini is the rim of an ancient volcano, and the harbor is actually the crater of the volcano. In this picture, you'll see 3 cruise ships parked in that harbor. There were actually 4, one just outside the picture. When we went on our excursion that day, the tour guide over and over told us how much she appreciated the fact that we were there. It turns out that in October of 2021 was the first time that they had had 4 ships in the harbor since 2019. It represented the high water mark of 2 years for them on an island that relies on tourism as the lifeblood of its economy. She then told us that in 2019, a good weekend for them would have 13 ships in the harbor. Cruising is back. It's not back all the way, but what is there is wonderful. Stay tuned for our next episode on the research tools that we use to plan our trips.